This is Hay on Wye, which is the picture I began with last time in Banter 34. And I've got my back to the Black Mountains and we're looking down on the town. So the next slide is actually the Resilience Initiative, which anybody who wasn't here last time, effectively we're using community assemblies in order to launch three pillars. Um, and the three pillars are addressing food, well-being, and energy. And in order to do that, we had to set up the Powers Facilitators team because we needed facilitators and note takers in order to run our assemblies. And because I'm a director of haypubliclibrary.org, which saved Hay Library, we created a new Hay Public Library assembly service so that that could be used by the community to run community assemblies if they so wish to do. And that was kind of the beginning of that. But the point about this is that this initiative, if you address um, the emission cuts, we reduce sustainable food by 22%, sustainable land use by 31%, and sustainable energy by 50%, 52% actually. So that's what we will achieve if we can become self-sustainable in food and energy and set up our well-being pillar. So let's get into the first assembly, which was the food assembly. Now we ran that in January 2024. And this is the question we asked. So but basically, first of all, you start off with why should anybody want to do this? So uh, in order to do that, in effect, I talked to over 150 people in the community and found out what they knew about climate change and asked them um, what we should do and why we should do it. And they came up with the concept of looking after food, looking after energy, and looking after mental well-being. And the why was for really for concern for their children and their grandchildren into the future. So the assembly deals with the how. You get people to an assembly to ask them, how might we do this, that, or the other? Um, and the assembly itself then comes out with the what. So we had over 80 attendees at that uh, and 40 on the waiting list. And it was funded by Extinction Rebellion and the Welsh Government. Um, so that was pretty cheery because we had no idea who would come or whether they'd come or how many would come, and it was a significant success. Um, anyway, so in effect, this assembly then came out with five points that they prioritized that we should get involved with. And the first one is a hub and to share information. Well, Black Mountains College is taking a lease on a property about 3 miles out of Hay, and this would provide us with space for a food hub and locations for sorting food sold on our proposed Hay Real Food online supermarket. And however, we also have ambitions to have a building in Hay to house the offices of all three pillars, to hold workshops, and as a friendly drop-in, supportive drop-in centre. So, and that comes up also in the Wellbeing Assembly later. Um, we're working with three connected organisations in order to make this possible. And the first one is, in other words, in order to be able to create a food hub and an online supermarket. Cultivate is the name of one of the organisations. Boyd Food Powers Food is a second, and the South Powers Food Partnership is the third. And um, with support from an organisation called Food Sense Wales, Social Farms and Gardens, and the Roderick Foundation. And you might remember from my last presentation that the Welsh Commissioner for Future Generations called a meeting to introduce this to the founders of Food Sense Wales, that's Katie Palmer, in August last year, and also to Gary Mitchell, senior manager for social farms and gardens, who co-founded Cultivate. So there's a connection here in what we're doing. And Cultivate is hiring a supply chain development officer 4 days a week. And that person will work with us on 1 day a week to set up the hub and the supermarket. Um, Now, on awareness and increasing demand for real local food, in June this year, we attended the Wales Community Energy Conference at CAT, the Centre for Alternative Technology. So we got to know them, and I'll be talking more about that when we get to the energy bit. At the beginning of August this year, we became aware of a research grant possibility. So we wrote to Paul Allen, who we'd met, who was head of CAT, asking if we could collaborate on this grant. He said yes, and we needed a further academic institution on board. So CAT found us someone in Cardiff University's business school to work with us. And jointly between the three organisations, we have just submitted our first academic research grant. It's for 55 grand. And this research project has been designed to help us understand the psychology needed to entice our householders to become members of our proposed Hey online real food supermarket. Um, and that means going back into the community and doing research with them. Now, we may not get that grant because it's highly competitive, but even if we don't, we now have a closer connection with CAT and with Cardiff University, which no doubt will go on into the future. So that's a plus for us, whatever happens. Now, removing barriers to access to land, we've done a lot to influence that with Banner National Park and with Powys County Council, where both the Park Planning Authority and the Powys Planning Authority uh, have had their interpretation rules rewritten in order to give horticultural farmers access to land. And that's been put in place, but I have to say it's not very effective. And there was huge opposition from the actual planning officers. Um, so the new rules don't really go far enough. And one has to take into consideration, and this may be a cynical view, but it does appear to be uh, um, something that I've learned in this process. Planning officers are by and large a lobby for the landed gentry in rural Wales, and the big landed estates don't want hippies who grow food to be given the right to live on the land, even if they own it. And that's largely the reason for the opposition to the change in the interpretation to the rules and the way that they're now being interpreted. Um, this assembly, this first assembly, came up with two more particular points. This was infrastructure support for growers and for growers to access funds and support for food production in community gardens and public spaces. Now, we actually haven't done much of those two, but we've done quite a lot on the rest. And just to remind you of the organizations involved in everything that we've done here. So and this was to help us start up Race to Zero. However, it meant that we started working with these various different organisations. So we've got Banner Brycheiniog, Powys County Council, Climate Cymru, who's been supportive all the way along. And then we've got Community Energy Wales uh, um, and Green Valleys. They, Llangatoc Green Valleys, they actually presented at our Energy Assembly. Um, our Food 1200 have been supporting us all the way along, and they're now active developing the number of growers in Wales in order to achieve the possibility of feeding Birmingham with real food from Wales. So that's a really big task. We're just feeding our local community. Um, and I've presented at the Wales Real Food and Farming Conference, and I've been to a couple of the Marches conferences, Real Food and Farming conferences, and in fact, we're going to one on Thursday and Friday as well. And we've also had very close relationships with Boyd Powell's Food. Um, so those are the organisations, and um, the reason I'm bringing this up is what we achieve by national support. The reason I'm bringing these people onto the page here is because actually, even well before I spoke last year, in November 2023, EGIN, the organization that I joined in order to be able to get funding in the first place, turned down our grant. And I was absolutely furious. So I wrote a report. I looked up their terms and reference. They definitely had rejected the grant on spurious terms and should have stuck to their own terms and references. And I took a real risk. I sent that report to everybody I could possibly send it to because I just sort of felt, come on, guys. They had actually thought that Eggin was basically set up maybe to do a bit of solar roofing, or maybe a community garden, or maybe an organization that wanted to grow a field of cabbages. And if I was doing any of those things singly, I would probably have got the grant. But because we were doing something strategic, they just couldn't get their heads around it. And that left me in a huge problem because in November 2023, I had no money. And so I turned my attention to Extinction Rebellion, and the Welsh government announced a climate conversations grant. And Extinction Rebellion agreed to underwrite our first food assembly, which happened in January last year. And the Welsh government came in and paid for a significant amount of it. So we were able to run our first assembly at that time. Now, if I hadn't in later in 2024, sorry, um, got these people on board, which I mentioned in the previous talk that I gave, um, and who knows who else. The next thing that happened after I gave that talk was I went to attend a food event outside Cardiff. And while I was there, this guy I didn't know came up to me and he said, "Hey, you are you Mike from Hay?" And I said yes. And Hay Public Library, Hay Resilience, and I said yes, absolutely. And he said, "Well, I'm a lottery funding officer, and I want to tell you that we want to ask you to resubmit your application. We've got it. We understand what you're trying to do, and we want to give you some money." So um, after that, I submitted the application, and in November, we were awarded our first large grant from Eggin, and that was a £15,000 grant, which is paid for a number of different things. But the first thing I did was got to get a professional on board as a project coordinator. Her name is Helen Greenslade, and this funding then secured Helen for 3 days a week, um, and it ran out in July in the middle of this year. So between December and July, we uh, got on and got cracking on everything that we needed to do. Um, and basically, once we got the Egging grant, we've now made friends with the National Lottery, and our new appointed funding officer advised that we apply for an Awards for All grant, which we did, and we got that uh, um, in actually in July. And so Halen is now funded for 4 days a week until the end of February next year. And of course, we have to apply for more grant applications in order to be able to keep the whole ship on the road. But let's get to the Energy Assembly, which we managed to run in January this year, and this time uh, um, this one was actually uh, it had 70 attendees, and it was funded by the Welsh government. They got back in touch and wanted us to apply for the climate conversation grant that they'd given us the previous year. This time I applied for a much bigger grant, and the agents who uh, sort of are sort of in between us and the Welsh government got in touch with me and said, well, they're never going to accept this and that and the other. And I said, well, okay, well, if they don't accept this, that, and the other, that's fine because I'll find the rest of the money, but whack it in anyway, and let's see what happens. And evidently, someone had got through to the Welsh government funding group that actually decides who gets the climate conversation grants. And they decided to give us everything that we asked for. So we were able to run the energy assembly because of that funding. And then that assembly came out with a number of proposals. Um, well, Going back a bit, to do any of this, we need a raft of company policies on volunteering, grievance procedures, safety data, data protection, etc., etc. And these take time. And so that was the first task I gave to Halin, with the second to build our website, both of which have now been achieved. Um, we can't actually go out and do a campaign to the community until we have done both this and this. So um, what actually happened was that in order to map community assets, what we ended up with uh, immediately after the assembly was we gained a free consultant from an organization called Compass, uh, and that's paid for by the Welsh government. And they are top-notch consultants, and ours is helping us with our business plan. We also had a local resident who came to the assembly who happened also to be a community energy consultant in the UK, and he has joined the energy management team and is absolutely invaluable. He understands watts and megawatts and all of that stuff, which neither Halen nor I do, which means that he's able to provide us with all sorts of information which we otherwise wouldn't be able to get hold of. Uh, so mapping potential energy site production sites was one of the things he helped us with. And this summer, we spent walking local streams and exploring hydropower opportunities and seeking out sites for solar and wind power. Now we have to find the sites first of all, then we have to go to find out who owns the land, um, and then we have to talk to them before we can start to consult further with our community about the reality of going forward with the project, basically. So we've started on that process. Um, as for collaborating with other stakeholders, um, there was a Community Energy Wales conference held this year in June at CAT, the Centre for Alternative Technology in Machynlleth. And Helen had never presented publicly before, and she's absolutely an amazing person. She's far brighter than I am and really full on and extremely engaged and excited by the project. And I thought she should be given a head and given the chance to do a presentation. It was a discussion presentation, but nevertheless. Um, and in that discussion presentation, it became a bit of a double act because there were lots and lots of questions given to her. And Helen was on the stage and I was in the audience, so where she couldn't answer something, I did from the audience. And afterwards, Paul Allen, who's head of CAT, spoke with both Helen and me, saying that he was really impressed with how thought through the Hay Resilience Initiative was. And, and because we made our presence felt at the Community Energy Conference. We found we are now networking with major movers and shakers within the community energy field. And a month ago, as a result of all that, Community Energy Wales asked Halin to join their board of directors. So now we have both an entry and access to everyone that we need in order to make the energy pillar happen. And we can't do youth. We haven't been able to get to youth and schools engagement yet, and we haven't been able to develop the practical materials because we haven't pretty much got started. So that was the second assembly that we launched, and it turned out pretty well. So the next assembly was the Wellbeing Assembly, and you'll probably recognize this person. This is Marie, the Deputy Director for Future Generations. She came and stayed opposite us for the weekend with her family, and not only did she do a keynote speech at this event, she also actually sat at a table and did the work. And she was really, really supportive, and that was a great boon for us. 51 people came to that event, so we'd had 80 at the first, 70 at the second, and 51 at the third, which is not as many, but it's perhaps more difficult to get your head round mental well-being than it is the other two. And it was funded by Eggin, the Eggin grant that we got. We had money left from that in order to fund this particular assembly. So if you add up now everybody who has either been to our assembly, or one of our assemblies, who is on the mailing list or who was on the waiting list, our attendees and subscribers to our newsletter comes to exactly 10% of our immediate population. There are 2,500 citizens in Hay, and we have engaged slightly over 250 people. As far as I'm concerned, that means we have a mandate. And if we have a mandate, we can ask for whatever we need for at any time from any organisation in Wales, and we have a spitting chance of maybe getting it. So the Wellbeing Assembly is a slightly different animal because we're going to bring about a shift in cultural change about mental well-being within the community. And the first thing that they wanted to do was to develop a community hub or dedicated safe physical space. Well, that also aligns with the food assembly that also wanted to do something similar. And although we may have a food hub outside of Hay, we will hopefully end up with a building in Hay, which will serve our needs. Now, this was one of the things I didn't expect, and that is that we should develop and promote a mental health first aid and basic listening skills training. Now, this is not the same as a mental health first aid course run by the NHS, because that's accredited, nor is it a first aid course run by the NHS or accredited bodies, which then gives the individual who goes through that process an accreditation to practice. This is going to be something that we develop in order to enable us to have at least 50% of our community understanding how to handle and deal with a member of our family or our neighbors or anybody that they come across who appears to be mildly depressed or mildly anxious about the climate. So climate showing signs of climate anxiety. And having discussed that with mental health practitioners before we actually ran this, we thought that we hoped that the community would come up with giving us an opportunity to be able to address mental well-being well before somebody needs help from the NHS. And all the practitioners that I spoke with, one of whom actually triaged for mental health services in the whole of Powys, um, were really supportive of that possibility. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Um, that again is something that improving mapping, communication, and sharing resources. Well, that hopefully will come together later on, and uh, fostering connection and inclusion through activities and resource sharing. I mean, effectively, the way that we're doing it now is growers will be supplying the online supermarket for food. Uh, that will mean that members of our community will be invited to their farms for events and meals. We will put on events and meals in the town, so the whole of our community involved in the resilience initiative will be actually um, um, communicating with each other and sharing and helping sharing resources, fostering connection and inclusion. Um, and the final one is to recognize and address structural barriers, inclusion, poverty, and access. Now, that has to be built in how we subsidize food and how we deliver it, and how we subsidize energy and how we deliver it. So we've ended up with effectively launching the three pillars, and the overall objective for each of them are as follows. So that's effectively what we've set out to do, and we've been given a mandate to do that by our community. So on the food pillar, there are five action addressing those five action points that I put up previously. So the immediate action of the food pillar was to inspire an evening food market, which actually, unfortunately, we've lost because we've lost the location in which it was held. But anyway, that was one of the first things that the food pillar, that the food assembly people organised, and they organised that themselves. Um, and a working relationship has been established with Cultivate and the South Paris Food Partnership in order to get our food hub and our new supermarket up and running. Wider collaboration with aligned organisations is underway. We're always talking to more people, and more people get involved in the initiative. Um, the business plan is under development, not just for the food pillar, but actually for the entire initiative. Um, and funding. Well, because we got in touch with CAT again in order to take up this potential funding opportunity. Um, that opportunity is actually designed to help us optimize our marketing strategy and to work on increasing demand for local food. And so that is a win for us all. Now the here's the energy list. Um, we found somebody in at our assembly who was an expert. He's joined the board, and I've already spoken about him, and that's fantastic. We've now got our own director on Community Energy Wales board of directors. We started the process of identification of energy generation sites, and there is more to do. Uh, this is a minefield, But because we have access to so many people who really have either done it or know what they're talking about doing it, we are in a position to be able to navigate our way through this minefield. And we're not going to go through the normal route. We're going to hit this sideways. And I'm not going to explain it to you all because it's way too complicated, and I haven't even got my head around it yet. But that's what's going to happen. Uh, when we have got that far, then we will start going into the community again with what we call a community spirit campaign. Um, Actually, at the assembly, they were talking about a love bombing campaign. We decided that that was language we wanted to use, so we changed the language. And we will be spending a lot of time winning over an even greater proportion of our citizenry, particularly for energy. But this gives you, this next slide gives you an idea of what we're doing in the way of social media uh, softening up, basically. So we've put this out on social media, um, followed by this, and finally this. So we're emphasizing that we're keeping wealth, jobs, and profit in Hay by building, running, and owning our own community energy initiative. So getting back again to the objectives and action points in that assembly, um, that is what we want to achieve in mental well-being training in the community. And that's basically it. So thank you very much. And I'll try and see if I can stop this presentation and stop sharing. Unfortunately, stop sharing seems to be on a...
Well done. Well done.
We're there.
Mike.
So, sorry, I rushed through that and I still taken half the time or slightly more of it. But I hope it does give you an overview of what we've done since we last spoke. And it's been hectic, um, nail biting, uh, exhausting. And even though I've got more another person on board, it seems as though, the reality of the situation is we're running five, what is it, four different organizations. We're setting up three businesses and food, well-being, and energy. But we're also setting up another business which owns all of that in the town. And we have to set up everything to make all that happen. And I didn't even look at any of the details of the stuff that we've achieved this year. I just plodded on trying to get the next thing done and the next thing done because uh, uh, I didn't think I'd get anywhere if I didn't have that approach. Um, and then the net result of that is there was never any website, there was never any communication to the outside world until we ran our first assembly. And then there had to be a whole pile of people we had to get on board in order to be able to get the support that we needed, to get the funding that we needed, to get the rest off the ground. So that's basically what we've managed to achieve, but it's an ongoing process. I mean, we run out of funding again in February next year. So by February next year, we have to have got enough funding to be able to make this more significant. The National Lottery wants us to make an even bigger application, and it'll be a 5-year application. But in order to put that together, we've got a lot of pre-work to do in business planning and so on and so forth, and deciding exactly what it is that we need the money for over those periods of years. So there's a lot of work to do before we go for that. And in between times, we have to find other sources of funding. So I spend my time promoting what we're doing and finding funding opportunities. And Haylin spends her time doing everything else pretty much. And that's how we've worked together. And we get on extremely well. And she is quite quite an amazing person. So I'm really, really glad that we've got her on board. And we're shortly going to be having somebody from Cultivate come and join us. So that means we will have 5 days of paid work a week, and myself working all hours, days and nights. I've been on this for 4.5 years now, but it's off the ground. It is going to happen. And so, as far as I'm concerned, it's not a done deal, but I'm a lot further forward than I was when I spoke with you last.
Well, Mike, thank you. I think that the your session 34 was the announcement of an idea that I thought was really going to incentivize people. I thought it was very exciting. I thought it was very community based, and I thought that was certainly the way to go, rather than top down. How delightful to find somebody who was going from the bottom up. And it's been really tremendous to see how that idea has fostered what you've grown into now with businesses and business plans and so forth. There are a couple of questions that I'd like to start the ball rolling with, if I may, because I was slightly puzzled. You said that the early funding that you found enabled you to run the three assemblies. And my question is, what is the cost of those assemblies? What is it you're funding there?
Right. Okay. An assembly costs us just under £2,000 to run, and that's made up of marketing, uh, hire of hall, um, uh, the cost of tea. Um, oh gosh, I can't remember what the entire budget of, but when you go through it all, um,
It adds
it
up.
comes to that amount of money. And initially, the Welsh government didn't want us to use leaflets. They wanted us to do it all by social media. But we have an aging population in Hay, and uh, we got the results through the leaflets that we developed. And leaflets are more expensive. You have to
Yeah.
you have to pay for them, and you have to pay for them to be delivered, and so on and so forth. But basically, uh, we can keep the cost of running an assembly to slightly below £2,000 each.
Okay, thank you. And a question that comes from that is you noticed in the couple of the first assemblies you had so many people showed up and then you had waiting lists. And I wasn't sure why they hadn't shown up. Why are they on a waiting list?
Because we couldn't fit them in the room. Uh, we had
A little
109
bigger.
people, we had 109 people in the room. There were 10 facilitators, 10 note takers, and 9 staff. That's PA person and film crew and front of house and so on and so forth. And which meant that we could only fit 80 people into the room. Actually, we put in 84, and we had slightly over 109 people, which we probably shouldn't have done at the first one. At the second, we didn't have that problem. And of course, the other thing is that those people who were on the waiting list were also on our uh, email list, so we could get them involved that way. And that's the way that happened. Frank. Oh, sorry, Graham, have you got more to
No,
ask?
well, I do have more, but I think you're absolutely right to get other people involved. So please do.
Frank.
Thanks very much, Mark. In the well-being, I'm really interested to see the well-being model. That's one of the things that I see as being part of sustainability, and we try and run it in Killearn, and it's a key aspect. And we use, I think it's Belfast's 5-step model of well-being, because I don't know whether it's optimism or naivety. I really want to see us use it to try and get some of our local GP practices to do social prescribing, so that people will actually get involved and volunteer. If you look at the steps of well-being of connect, be active, give, be aware, and so on, all those things people get when they volunteer and take part in climate action in their local communities. So we can get that virtuous circle. Have you had any success in that, or is that something you've been thinking about?
Well, yes, I mean, if uh, we would begin with our existing volunteers, and at the first assembly, I think 61 people filled in a form offering various skills that they had available. And so we're in touch with those, and each of the assemblies have done a similar sort of thing. So we would start with our volunteers, and but before we do that, we need to get to the professionals in order to be able to create whatever it is that we're trying to teach the volunteers so that they engage with the community. And we want to teach them to teach others how to do this, or a group of them at least. So that I mean, my ambitious target is that half of our community should know how to handle a situation when they come across somebody who looks or feels mildly depressed or suffering from climate anxiety, initially anyway. That's our intention. Does
No,
that
that's
help?
great. No, it is. I think I'm still trying to work. I mean, I think that's a very admirable thing to do, and I think you're absolutely right. If your volunteers can, because they'll have the outreach within their own social networks. But I'm also trying to see if I can get the actual doctor practices to take on board what we're doing in terms of climate action and what we can offer people in terms of volunteering and engagement. So that if someone turns up in a doctor's surgery saying, I feel down, I don't know what I'm doing, they can then recommend to them that they get involved in South Australian Climate Action Network, because that's a good thing. Or get involved in one of our local cycle groups, or get involved. There's a range of community activities, and I don't think NHS has taken that on board to actually see, rather than drugs or placebos,
Yeah.
reconnect with your community and get more involved.
Well, that's an absolutely brilliant idea. I don't think we quite thought of it that way, but now that you've told me about it, we will.
Wonderful.
Okay, Sue.
Yep, thank you. So, couple of points, questions. So, um, as somebody who's sort of full on with what I'm doing at the moment, town council, district, supporting community groups, I can't do the initiating, but what I do in sessions like this is look, how can I bring that back to the structure that we have in my area? What new idea might help? So 2 points was really so that we've started an initiative in Battle, which is called Battle Solar Town, which is the goal is that 25% of the energy used in Battle will be produced by solar in Battle. That is the goal of that organisation. It started at 2%, so we've got a long way to go. But moving with both working with the community energy company, but also trying to stimulate individuals to put solar on their roofs by information, etc. So I suppose that is sort of the solution, whereas where Mike, you've started, is what do the community want? What would they engage in? And I see that there would be lots to learn, especially if we can't move forward quickly enough, really. So I just wondered if you thought that was sort of a not negative, but if we're missing a shot there, do you think? Just your comments, really.
Yeah, well, I think it was the Community Energy Network, which is throughout the UK, announced an opportunity for whoever was working in energy to have a mentor. And I got a mentor who has actually set up, I think, over 12 community energy roof solar initiatives in small communities of groups of streets in London.
Mm-hmm.
And if you email me, and what I can do is I can talk to her and get her to give me the name of whoever might be the right person for you to talk to about replicating what they've already done. Because if they've already done it, it gives you a pathway. and it makes it a lot easier for you to do it. Would that work?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, like I say, I'm sort of one end of this, trying to support the community group. If you could put your email address in the chat, that would be helpful. But
Good.
and we have actually had two lots of money now. We meaning anyway, that's so sort of pushing forward with the project. And the other bit I wanted to ask you about, thank you for that, Mike, was about the well-being and people. You mentioned about climate anxiety, and I was concerned that people can have well-being issues, not necessarily related to climate. And how do you say, well, we will, or we'll talk to you about that, but we won't support you in that? I just wondered if that was an area of concern.
No, absolutely not. When to us, it doesn't matter why they're feeling depressed. Uh,
Uh,
matters is that we identify that there is a growing number of people who are suffering from what's called climate anxiety, and they tend to be younger people. And this we know to exist. There's been research done on it, and it is growing fairly rapidly. Uh, uh, as far as being mildly depressed, well, I think there's a fairly big surge on that. I mean, for example, if you were to go to your doctor at the moment, there's two options for the doctor. One is to give you pills, and the other one is to put you on a waiting list to see a psychologist. Now, if you get put on the waiting list to see a psychologist, it will take you a minimum of 1.25 years to get to see them, by which time your circumstances will have changed and may not be the appropriate place for you to be at that time. Um, so what we want to do is we want to see if we can find something which we can do in the community. And one of the best ways of dealing with somebody in the street, I mean, we all walk down our streets and we all recognize people, and some of us have got more community communication than others. But if you see somebody who is obviously feeling a bit down, you'd normally say, "Hello, how are you?" And they'd say, "Oh, wonderful," and you'd know they weren't.
right. And you're
Uh,
not
and
really.
and and uh, uh, and under those circumstances, the best thing to do is, I was thinking about you the other day. I wonder if you could help me with something. And then what you do is you direct them to whatever activity it is that you can find to get them involved in the community in a voluntary basis in order to be part of this resilience initiative or whatever else is going on in the community. That's the way I would approach it.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. So I thought, lovely. Thank you, Mike.
Frank, you're
On the energy one, it's probably, again, you gave us a tremendous overview across a very wide area, so I appreciate you had a chance to go into the same level of detail. But you're looking quite strongly at energy renewables and generating enough local energy for the community. Is the situation in England, certainly in Scotland at the moment, we can't sell directly to our communities. It's got to go through one of the electricity providers. And I think England's got that as well, or have you managed to navigate a way around
uh,
that?
well, there is a way if you use wind power to have it directly support an institution in your locality. But to be honest, I don't think we've got an institution big enough that would take it on. Um, so the vast majority of it would go to the grid, and um, there is a way of getting different levels of tariffs to being paid by the grid, which is the minefield that I was talking to you about,
Mm.
which frankly I haven't got my head around yet. Uh, but if you do it sideways on, then you can get a better rate from the grid. And if you get a better rate from the grid, you can make more profit. And if you make more profit, then you can use that profit in a wealth fund to redistribute wealth within your community. So that's our approach. But we're stuck in the same situation. Now,
Uh,
if everything breaks down, which is not beyond the means of possibility, if everything breaks down, the mere fact that we are generating energy means that we can rewire it directly into the
no.
town if we wanted to. And that's the resilience part of it.
The other thing, and again, it's probably happening, but just you didn't have time to cover the slides. We're trying to do it from both ends. So there's looking at how we can generate locally, but also looking at retrofit to try and see how we can actually reduce the energy demand. Because we're collecting rural villages. Lots of them are very old. Lots of them are not particularly energy efficient. And I mean, it's great that increasing planning constraints come out saying you've got to be this and this and this for building new houses, but 80% of our housing stock's already out there, and we've got to try and find ways of reducing its energy waste.
Yes, I mean that's a big thing, but there are grants available, and I haven't looked at them for a while. Um, but I do know people who have put uh, uh, um, uh, have been able to get grants for insulation and so on for and so forth, in conjunction with putting solar panels on their roofs, and so you'd need. I mean, I don't know what the situation is in Wales, but some of these I think are actually government initiatives, not just regional government initiatives.
I think that's right. I think what we've suffered from, certainly up in Scotland, is a series of silver bullet solutions from government. So everyone should do cavity wall insulation. That's the answer. Then everyone should do loft insulation. That's the answer. Then everyone should do condensing boilers. The current one is everyone should have air source heat pumps. And all these are good technologies if they're well fitted and if they're part of a holistic approach. But if you don't have a fabric first approach, single solutions aren't going to save money and they aren't going to deliver the benefits. So it's trying to argue with government that it needs to be more holistic in its thinking.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. But my feeling is that we probably wouldn't get involved in an initiative for insulation until we had funding and had a wealth fund in order to be able to at least pay towards it. Because otherwise, we'll divert ourselves to an individual rather than doing something for an entire community. Stuart.
Hi, thanks. I appreciate we're running out of time, but I would like to sort of congratulate you on an amazing effort. It sounds as though you got more than a full-time job on your hands, just running the resilience organisation. But just to ask one question, how did you get so much community involvement? I mean, to get 10% of your population involved and volunteering and interacting is, from my point of view, actually quite amazing. Do you have any tips on how to do it?
Yeah, I sent Graham a document, which I'm sure I'll improve last night, which was how to replicate the Hay Resilience Initiative. And it's a PDF, and hopefully it'll be uh, up in the knowledge base. And if you download that, you can, it tells you how we did that. Uh, Basically, we did it by using intrinsic motivation and intrinsic open sentences in our copy. So we appealed to people emotionally. And that's the reason why we got Brexit, because um, you appeal to a part of the brain which doesn't have the ability to speak or think. It just feels. And if you can find a way of communicating with that, you will get people to come to your event. But we already knew, when I spoke to over 150 people, and every single one of them was concerned about climate change and that nothing was happening, and that the national governments didn't seem to be doing enough, and they weren't being asked to do anything, and what the hell was going on, and how were we going to deal with this? So there's an anxiety even among those people that I spoke to about the future, a mild one, I'd say, because it seems far away. Uh, and that led me to believe that if you vocalize that to them, then they would respond, and it appears that that is what happened. Um, anyway, download that PDF and have a look.
Okay, I'll have a look. Anyway, congratulations.
Thank you. That's very kind of you.
Excellent effort.
Graham, you're on silent. Sorry.
I'm just Sorry, I just wanted to follow up on a couple of points. The first to Stuart, and I will put that document up in the knowledge base, but it's not there yet. Another for Sue to say that I don't know if you'd noticed that I put an address in the chat for you that could be helpful. And lastly, for Frank and for, I guess, everybody really, the but also particularly Mike for you in mapping, there is a very fast moving operation in self-generated electricity, community generated, that the rules are changing constantly. And the big issue, as you mentioned, is getting localized access to the grid for people producing energy. But there are lots of ways now being explored of using locally generated electricity locally, and not involving well, I'm saying not involving the grid. You are involving the grid, but you don't need to involve the grid manager to be able to do this. There are ways of linking up the local networks to your solar community farm or your wind turbine. So the situation in your meeting is recognized, and there are lots of people working on getting around it. And this is a question for Mike, really. One of the people that's deeply involved in this is the chairman of Parish Online, which is a mapping system. I just wondered whether you are familiar with Parish Online as mapping, but they're deeply involved with climate action, and they're adjusting their product to be able, for instance, to say, pick out all the south-facing roofs in your community so that you can know immediately which ones should have solar PV to their benefit, even if they don't at the moment.
Well, we are aware of some sort of mapping process because the guy came along and has joined us in order to do that. Ben, he came up with maps showing us exactly where we could actually locate wind turbines and solar. But we had to go and look at the rivers and streams ourselves, and in fact, none of them are suitable. The River Wye would be suitable, but we'd never ever get permission to do it, and we might waste an awful lot of time trying. But you know, with one turbine and some solar arrays, we can actually match our energy consumption. But so I am aware of a mapping thing, but not particularly of that. And I'll if you could stick that into the chat, then
Yeah, sure.
I'll make sure I get it and follow it up. So I'm constantly learning here. It's
Well, I think that's the whole point of these things, and I love the way that people are talking of beginning to work together, because that's the only way we're going to get things done, and doing it at the community level, which of course is the whole basis of great collaboration. So
yeah.
I'm delighted, and everyone says we've got to work together, or we've got to expand our community size, or whatever. So fantastic stuff. So over to Sue.
Yeah, just to come back on that. So I'm also one that doesn't get the megawatts and all that stuff. But on our Battle Solar Town website now, I think the residents have access to put in an address and then get the roof and all that. And we're working with a community energy company. Well, it's not company, not for profit, called Energize Sussex Coast, and they are the ones who facilitated the software or to be able to do that. So that might be relevant. You can do a bit of research on both of those and get the names that I can't remember.
Great. So, looks as though we've come to the end of questions.
Yes, sorry, I was just putting your requested address in the chat.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Mike, as expected, it was a fascinating and wide mind-opening experience. Thank you so much. And what I love also is the way you've set yourself up for a rematch next year to see how you're doing after the February money's run out. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us. Next week, we have an almost extraordinarily unpronounceable presentation by someone from Middlesex University who's going to show us how we can get better integration by working together across multiple dimensions. So I thought that was too exciting to miss. Before I log off, there was clapping hands from Frank and presumably something from Sue. So thank you. See you all next time, and Mike, thank you again for a very reassuring and up-spiriting type presentation. Well done. Thank you,
Yep.
Bates. Take
Thanks
care
very
all.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye then.